It's such a joy to be able to see all of the different men and women in the church that help us, what we're trying to do. And I know Patricia just went out to do children's class, things of that nature. And we appreciate Jim, what he had to say this morning. And we are blessed in so many ways, but I'm going to tell you about a blessing that's coming. Next week, Jim's going to be preaching for us. He's done that in the past, and we want to keep encouraging him to develop that talent. And you can see this morning that he has a way of reaching out to us. I really enjoy it. And Juan did a great job with song service and this sort of thing. And Logan, what they do regularly to help us, bless us in the service on Sunday morning. It is true that the offering that we give, not all of it, but some of it goes into the work that we're trying to do in South and Central America, as was mentioned. And I got a notification this week that actually Carlos himself wrote me, but Carlos Leon, who is the one who handles the money that we send down to Venezuela to be shared among a lot of preachers and a lot of people that are in need. And he told me that he was on his third day of not feeling well, having pain in his joints and fever and so forth. And you can guess what it was. He's got COVID. And like Juan said this morning, well, he's young, strong. He really is. He's a very talented young man and very athletic. And so we're counting on him getting well soon. He has another member of the church, one of our neighbors there in San Antonio de los Altos, that has been helping a lot and slightly supported, not much, but he's getting a little bit more this month than he has in the past months. But his name is Diego. We also know him as Roberto. He was Roberto before, and I guess it was Roberto Diego, and then he changed over and decided he wanted to be known more as Diego. But he and his whole family got sick with COVID. I think that's probably where Carlos got his. And as a result, was in bed for days and had to sleep face down. And Diego and his family, I think all of them are doing well now. And Carlos is sick, and he'll be with his wife and children, and I'm hoping that they don't get what he has, but it's concerning, and we depend on him a lot to help us in what he's trying to do for the people there. And that's why this light is not good for me right here. I have to move this a little bit to do my readings today because I'm right under that light and it's on the screen, but I've got it now. And I'll just move on myself. I want to talk to you about some helpless scarecrows. You might want to feel sorry for them because they really are impeded in their abilities. They're not very talented. They can't walk, they can't talk, they can't see, they can't hear. They don't have a heart, so there's no blood flow through their body. They're cold day and night. Poor things they're just pitiful. That's all I can say for them. And yet we're down to Halloween, and we know that the Wizard of Oz had a guy that was playing the part of the Scarecrow, and there's a lot of disadvantages of being a scarecrow. For one thing, they don't scare people very much. If you dress up like a scarecrow on Halloween, they think you're just not doing as well as you used to do and don't make as much money as you used to be able to do and hadn't bought any new clothes lately, but you wouldn't scare anybody. But the Bible talks about scarecrows, and the term in the Greek really doesn't come out as scarecrow, but it's the same idea, but it's talking about idols. Jeremiah had to confront a lot of idolatry, meaning that the people of Israel were falling into the practice of worshiping the false gods, the non-existent gods represented by statues of gold, silver, and wood and other things, and clay. But they would bow down before him and worship him after they've made it with their own hands. Jeremiah talks about the fact that a man goes out into the forest and he cuts a tree down, as we just read in our reading this morning, and they form with a chisel an image. I've got a guy at my house sitting on a shelf that I picked up in Ecuador, made out of wood, carved, and it's interesting, and it is typical of the laborers in Ecuador, and it's sort of a nice little carving, but he's never talked to me. He won't say a thing. When I talk to him, he seems emotionless. He never responds. He's just a chunk of wood. He's not a real human being, although that's what he was fashioned to look like. And that's typical of all idols. What's that?
You should have brought it.
Should have brought him here today. I'll bring him next week, maybe, let you get to know him. You can talk to him if you want to, but he won't answer. I promise. I've tried that so many times. Every now and then we have to kind of patch him up a little bit, oil him up a little bit, make it look good again, dust him off. But he's inanimate. He's just a piece of wood. But Jeremiah points out that after they go out and cut this tree down and take a chunk of it and turn it into an idol, you got all that extra wood. You just cut a tree down. So what do? You take the rest of the wood and you put it in the fireplace to be able to heat the room, to be able maybe even to cook over it, you know. You burn the balance. And this is the material from which you made your God. This is something that is left over after you have formed some figure that you're going to worship, as though that figure could do anything for you, could help you. And what he says here, and what we read already, is that they have to nail it down sometimes to keep it from falling over. I guess our little man's fallen over several times, hasn't it, Kelly? And fortunately hasn't cracked in half, but they formed their God out of a chunk of wood, but in the balance of it, they burn. That would kind of give you an idea of the value of the material from which this God is made. And you can understand why that particular image that you made can't do anything for you. They're like scarecrows. Well, what is a scarecrow? It's something you put in your garden to be able to keep birds and animals away from what you're trying to produce. And often it's used for corn. Out in the fields, you'll have a human figure or a shirt or something. Kelly in her tomato patch puts strips of aluminum foil. And I guess we've never thought about worshiping that, have we? No, never ever used it. But it tends to blow away sometimes too, our gods, if that were our God. It would just blow away in the wind and disappear. Oh no, my God, blow away the wind. And but you see the foolishness of it. And now let's read again Jeremiah 10:5. Like a scarecrow in a cucumber patch, their idols, and you can substitute the word God there, their gods cannot speak. They must be carried because they cannot walk. Do not fear them. They can do no harm, and they cannot do any good. They're good for nothing. And except to maybe scare away a crow. And that's why they're called scarecrows. But we don't want to find ourselves bowing down before something that we had to make ourselves, that can't speak, talk, walk, and if you're not careful, will fall over, just tumble downhill or something. No, you don't want to have a scarecrow as your God, and that's all that these wooden figures were. And in the actual biblical language of Jeremiah Hebrew, that's the idea. It is something that is just manufactured by a human hand, a figure, but that has no soul, no spirit, is not able to do anything. And it's hard for us to imagine people worshiping things like that. But I was watching a film over at Danny's house last night, and it talks about the Incas and the mountains of Peru and Ecuador. And it pointed out that there are still people that worship images in those countries, indigenous people that live high in the mountains of the Andes, and who are sometimes educated, but still worshiping things that they have gathered or created themselves. And it's so in vain. It's such a waste of time and illogical. And so we don't want to be guilty of doing the same. And I'm going to probably bring another lesson later where I'll go into Colossians chapter 3 and talk about the fact that Paul said that greed is a form of idolatry. In what sense? Well, I'm not counting on this wooden image to take care of me. I'm not counting on these leaves off of this particular bush to take care of me. And I'm not burning things that produce some smoke that's supposed to help me in my daily life. But I am worshiping my money, and I'm counting on it taking care of me. And if I have any problems, I'll turn to my money to take care of it. So greed, avarice can become a form of idolatry because you're not depending upon God, putting your trust in Him, like we read, Jim read for us today, in John 14. You believe in God, you trust God, well, believe me and trust me also, Jesus said. And so we do put our trust in God. We put our trust in our Savior, Jesus Christ. But you know, our money says that in God we trust. Maybe it just should have said, in thee do I trust on the bill, instead of in God I trust. Because too many people don't trust in God, they trust in the bill itself, the money, the resources they have, as being their hope. Do you have hope for the future? Well, yeah, I've got a 401k, got a retirement fund, I've got some savings in the bank. I own a piece of property, or I own my own house or apartment or something. And so we put our trust in things that are inanimate, that can't walk, can't talk, can't see. And then we laugh at the people who have their scarecrows, and in the sense of having an idol that they stick up somewhere and worship it after they carved it and then burn the rest in the fireplace. But then we don't laugh at ourselves, and we don't see ourselves as being participants in the same program as they. Because we are putting our hope, our faith, our trust, alleviating our fears by looking at our bank account. Now, I confess that we have a retirement fund, and I confess that I regularly check it. The only reason I do it today is not because I trust so much in it. It's just I don't trust others in this world of technology not to have stolen it while I was asleep. And so I just want to make sure it's still there. But we can't let our trust rest on things that are inanimate, that have to be nailed down so they don't totter or fall, and that keep us from being fearful. Do not fear them, it says here in this context we're reading. Don't fear them, because they can't do any harm, and they can't do any good by themselves, nothing. And so we don't fall for that. So we think. But when I look at the news and I realize that, oh my, regular is now up to $4.99. It's gone. It's actually up to about $505. And how much now? What you paid last time? $5. But in California, it's over $7 now for gasoline. So as people begin to think about where they're going to go, how long they're going to stay, when they're going to come back, and things of that nature, it's concerning, to say the least. Isn't that a nice word? Concerning. But what that means is scares me to death in some instances, some people. And then we have COVID. I mentioned to you, Carlos and his family maybe are coming down with COVID. He definitely has it. And he told me, he says that his joints are aching, something terrible. He's had fever. He's been in bed for 3 days, except when he got up to go to the doctor finally, and I'm glad that he did. But we worry about the pandemic that we're facing. We worry about the viruses that might get loose. And then I personally, this is my own thought, I personally think it's just amazing that this pandemic was started by a virus, right? And where did the virus come from? That's been a big question in the news. And most people believe it came from Wuhan, very close to where my son Rusty used to live as a missionary. And it spread all over the whole world. As a matter of fact, people were sent out of China, out in Chinese New Year's, to spread it around the world as tourists. And as we think about all of that, I think, how strange that working with a virus, hoping to turn it into a weapon, it got away. And now all of us around the world, every country has had to have fear that we might get sick with COVID and die. We lost Tom. He died with COVID. And I'm sure that you know others, I know others, that we're not going to try and name all of them today, but there's a lot of people who have died with that virus. But we generate. And so that doesn't say much for our intelligence. Maybe the idols that are whittled out of wood that somebody cut down in a forest are more intelligent than some of us. At least the trees don't cause us to have mass deaths. And then you think about the weapons that are being developed. It's great to turn on TV and watch the news. And what do they tell you? That there's a rocket being tested that can travel at 7 times the speed of sound and can carry nuclear weapons aboard. Can you imagine what that would do to New York City, to Los Angeles, or other places here in the United States? And so I don't want to hear any more about the pandemic. I think I'll not study. No, I'm not going to look at the missile. I don't want anything to do with it. I made it the price of gasoline. I don't know that either. And then we're told by the weatherman that this winter probably is going to be one of the hardest we've ever had, which I doubt. But nevertheless, that's what's stated. That's what you hear. So the weather is going to get near, the pandemic is going to get near, the bomb's going to get near. Something's going to. And I tremble and I shake and I worry. Should I do that as a Christian? Now, fear is an instrument used by the devil to turn us away from God, cause us not to trust in Him. And I'm glad Jim read, John 14, 1 through 6 to start out today, because it fits right in what we're talking about. Jesus said, you believe in the Father, and I love the translation that he had. It says, you trust in the Father, trust also in me. And that's where we need to put our trust, in God and not in men. Well, where are we going to get that confidence that God's with us and is going to take care of us? We tell our kids that, don't we? I remember the story that I heard years ago, and I probably shared with some of you already, that a little girl was with her mom and there was lightning outside and thunder outside. And so she came and crawled up into her mother's lap and was shaking and trembling. And the mother said, what's wrong, honey? And she says, well, I'm scared. I'm scared of the lightning. I'm scared of the thunder. I'm scared of the storm. And her mother said, no, you don't need to be worried. I'm here, And God loves us. God takes care of us, and God's going to watch over us. And you don't have to worry. And she says, I know, Mom, but right now I need somebody who has skin. Hold me. And, we could be frightened by so many things in life. Life presents itself with a lot of challenges. When you pull out onto I-25 and you got 4 or 5 lanes of traffic flying by at 60 and 70 miles an hour, almost like bullets in the air, and you know how many people get killed on the highways every year. Even driving in traffic can be frightening. Kelly is always scared when I'm driving. For some reason, it doesn't seem to bother her that she's driving, and that's cool with that. But fear can ruin our lives. Do you agree with that? Yes or no? Fear can ruin your life if you let it dominate you. But there's something in the Bible that usually is shared out in the hallway. It's a story. And I don't want us to miss it today because it's a real important story found in 1 Samuel 17, beginning of verse 20. And it talks about David. David was a young shepherd boy, just a boy. And his story is told in Bible classes to children over and over. Matter of fact, I have people sometimes say, what are they teaching in the Bible class? Well, Noah and the ark, creation, and all of these stories. And, they say, well, they get that all the time, don't they, Kelly? But that may be why they trust in God as much as they do, is because they're reading the stories that we as adults need to be concentrating on again. Because over and over again, we need to go back and look at them and see how fear can be such a great enemy, but how faith in God can be the solution to our fears. We read early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd. He was a little shepherd boy. He had a little flock, and so he left it with another shepherd and loaded up and set out as Jesse, his father, had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. They were at war. And the Jewish army, these groups of men like David, but older, dressed for war, sword in hand, were getting ready to go into a battlefield. And he arrives at the time that they early in the morning are getting ready to go out and take their positions, shouting the war cry. Oh, you think about football games here in the States when you think about war cries and what they shout when they go onto the field, and how they're going to threaten the other team with victory on their part. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. So you've got two armies facing each other, and they're all shouting their songs of victory and their themes as they marched toward one another. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines. In other words, he had some things he left there for his brothers, but then he ran out where the battle was actually going on. He's a little boy, and he comes running out onto the battlefield. He's not dressed for it. He's not ready for it. He doesn't have a weapon. David left his things for the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. How y'all doing? How's it going? And they're getting ready to go into battle out there with the Philistines in line like they should be. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, huge man, a giant, fearsome in appearance. As he was talking with him, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. He began to challenge God, challenge the Jews, challenge these warriors, challenge the Israelites. And he stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. He heard what he said. Here's this big, giant, ugly man saying things against his God. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. There's our word, fear. He's not an atomic bomb. He's not an epidemic. He's not a pandemic. He's not. There are a lot of things that can scare us. But he, as a soldier, was fearsome and scared all the Israelite soldiers. Now, the Israelites had been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He just steps out every morning and says things bad about our God and about us. He comes out to defy Israel. Defiance. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt the family from taxes in Israel. That almost sounds like the United States, doesn't it? You know, you won't have big taxes next year. And so anyway, he's going to reward richly anybody that kills Goliath. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? How presumptuous. They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked him, this is kid, my youngest brother, comes running up, and he's a kid, he's a little boy. And he's asking what's going to happen to the person who kills that giant that all of us fear. And he's very angry at David for even getting involved. He shouldn't have. He's just a kid. And he shouldn't be out there saying things like that or asking what he's going to get if he kills this giant that all of us fear. Burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? You ran off and left the sheep in the wilderness. They'll probably all be dead by the time you get home. I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. This is, David and Goliath were talking about, and his brother Eliab. This line I don't think is mentioned very often when the story is told in the children's class about how conceited David was and how angry his brother Eliab was for what he was saying and what he was asking. Oh, I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. What judgment. You came down only to watch the battle. Here you are, you had to come and see the show, didn't you? Little David can't stay with his sheep. He's got to come out here and make his presence known and ask what the king is going to do to the man who kills Goliath. Who are you? You going to do anything about it? Could you do anything about it? Now, what have I done? What have I done? Said David. I haven't done anything wrong. Can I even speak? Then he turned away to someone else, not Eliab, and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. Well, you want to pay taxes, you'll be the king's daughter, and you'll be wealthy. And what David said was overheard and reported to Saul, King Saul. There's a boy out there who's asking what you're going to do for him if he kills Goliath. Really? Nobody else has come to me and asked me what I'll do if I've offered, but nobody's taken me up or even questioned me about it. Bring that boy here. Bring him in here. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Then no one lose heart." Now, all these things I was talking about, that when you turn the news on in the morning, you're going to go to church, you almost feel like staying home and not coming and worshiping after you hear all of the things that are happening in the world and what the politicians are doing to each other and where our country stands these days and what is going to happen probably economically before the month's over. And you sit there and all of a sudden you don't feel like eating breakfast and you wonder, what should I do? Maybe I ought to go dig a cave somewhere and hide in it and wait until 1,000 years ago by and then come out and see if anything's any better. David said to Saul, that no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight. This little boy is telling King Saul, he's telling him, don't worry, I got this one. I'll take care of him. And that had to be a little bit unbelievable, but King Saul really wanted somebody to do something about Goliath, and he wasn't. Saul wasn't going to do anything about it. So David makes this offer. Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." So he's trying to help this ignorant young boy, David, understand that what he's suggesting that he's going to do, he can't do. He can't do it. You can't solve this problem because you're too young, you're too little, you're too good looking, while I mentioned it. I'm not going to let you go. But David said to Saul, your servant, speaking of himself, has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, and that's what they would do, they just pick it up first and haul it off. They wouldn't necessarily kill it right there or try to eat it right where they find it. I went after it, I chased down the lion, I chased down the bear, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, that's what would usually happen if you took away their prey, they would come after you. And so, I seized it by the hair and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. Now I see real big there, one word stands out that describes what is his spirit at that moment. What's the word? Faith. Faith is that which dispels fear. Jesus said, you trust in the Father, trust also in me. And I see faith being displayed here. I'll take care of this jerk. I will kill this Philistine because he has defied, imagine, the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. All said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. I can imagine the tone of David's voice, the anger, the disgust that he must have expressed to Saul when he was talking about Goliath. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistines. I have seen people in different news clips where they're showing what's happening in the streets, young people coming out and rebelling and marching against some cause over in that area of the world, in Israel, Palestine, and all of these other countries, and where they have so many Arabs, and you see kids out there with their slings and their rocks they picked up from the debris of the houses that have already been bombed, and they swinging those things in. They're huge, they're long, and they can sling it with a great deal of velocity, enough to kill somebody. And that's what David had. That was all he had. He didn't have on special shoes. He didn't have on special garment. He didn't have a shield, a sword, a helmet. He didn't have any of those things. And he was ready to take on this man that everybody feared, who was a giant in size and had a huge sword, heavy. Everything about it and everything he had was oversized and overweight, but perfect for a giant. And he says, I'll take care of it. But he took 5 stones. And, people ask me, why do you think he took 5? He was only going to need 1, yeah. But Goliath had 4 brothers, and just in case David had to kill the other 4, he had 5 stones. Again, that big word comes up. What is that word? Faith. Yeah, he took 5 stones just in case. But he wasn't going to need it because he was going to kill one guy, and he does just that. I like that picture. I think that's probably what it really looked like. And then we read, meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him. He's got a shield bearer in front of him. The guy's carrying his shield, protecting him from who? The shepherd boy, the little boy. Oh, and with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. Closer. Probably at a distance, he thought he was a full-grown man, but when he gets closer and closer, he sees just a little boy. He looked David over and saw that he was just barely a little bit more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome. And he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. In the name of, and he started naming off his gods. I curse you. Did that scare David? No, because he knew that all of the gods of this Philistine were scarecrows. can't walk, can't talk. They totter, and if you don't nail them down, they'll fall over. His gods don't even breathe, can't see. They're blind, deaf, dumb, inanimate, don't have any life in them, no spirit. And so David's not worried about his gods being a curse against him. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and to the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the living God, not the dead one, not the one that can't walk, talk, see, or hear. I'm talking about the one who is the creator of the universe. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." You've challenged God. You haven't challenged me. Your fight is not with me, it's with God, the God that made the universe. "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands." Oh, the little boy is telling Goliath, "God's going to give you into my hand. You'll see. And I'll strike you down and cut your head off. I'm going to call you." Oh, this brat has such guts. What a shame. He's an idiot. But David says, "I'm going to kill you. In the name of my God who lives, I'm going to kill you after cursing by the name of your gods what I'm trying to do today. This very day I will give your carcasses, the carcasses of the Philistine army, to the birds and the wild animals. Not only you, but all of your friends are going to die too. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." When they see that, when they see that a little boy has come and killed Goliath, and when they see the carcasses that are going to be left after the Israelites gain some guts and go after them and kill them all and leave their carcasses out there for the birds to eat, then they'll know that there really is a God in Israel, and he's not a scarecrow. He's a living God. All those gathered here will know that it is not, everybody will know after this is over, that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. The battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. With that, Goliath receives that blow from that one stone. That was all he needed today. Just one. Sank into his forehead, and he was finished. As the Philistines moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it, struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand. He struck down the Philistine and killed him. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Had a guy shooting a slingshot at my house. This is all coincidental, but interesting. Came home, and we had a young girl working with us in Trinidad, and all of a sudden I hear bang. And I went, "What in the world was that?" And what was it? His name worked with us at that time when they were shooting a slingshot at our house. I can't remember. No, it wasn't Ruth. It was somebody else. But anyway, I said, "What in the world was that?" And she said, "Oh, it's the boy sitting on a pile of rocks over there on the other side of the road. They've been shooting with slingshots at your house all day long. They didn't like me." That was a racial situation there in Trinidad and Tobago. It was the time of Black Power and all that sort of thing. As Christians, we didn't get involved. And we had people of every race and background that you can imagine, and in the church. And so I went out to see him. And as I walked out into the road, this guy stood up, and he had a slingshot. He pulled it back, threatened me, going to kill me. And I said, well, let me get a little bit closer. You can't kill me at that distance. You're too far away. Let me get closer. And I kept coming closer and closer. And he kept saying, I'm going to kill you. And threatening me. And finally, as I got closer, some of his friends were sitting on the rock pile. He turned and threw his slingshot to them. Oh, I'm not going to bother with you. And then I continued to talk to him for about a mile down the road until he got an axe and tried to kill me. And then after that, we went our ways. And so it was interesting that he was trying to kill me with a rock out of a slingshot. You think I didn't remember this story? Oh, yeah, I did. But that's why I kept one hand up. But it was a story where I was challenged to be fearful and run and hide. But I know what would have happened if I had ever turned and run. It would have been over. We would not have been able to live in that neighborhood anymore. But as it was, his friends caught the slingshot and let him walk down the street, me chasing right behind him, just lecturing me. And when I came back, I said, where's your hero? And they said, oh, you know. And I said, yeah, I do know. He's a coward. And I said, if you want to know about a person that's really brave, you need to come down to the community center on Sunday and let me tell you about Jesus Christ, who laid down on the ground and let men drive nails through his hands and feet so that you guys can come out here and sit on this pile of rock and not have any fear today. We have a hero. We have a hero that we're very proud of. His name is Jesus. And so I invited my neighbors to come and be with us for church. I want to read some verses of scripture now. Guess who wrote these? The little boy David, after he became a man and began to write songs that could be sung. And these are the songs that he sang. He had a right to sing these songs after what he had done and who he'd become. For in the day of trouble, he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his sacred tent and set me high upon a rock. You are my hiding place. You will protect me from the trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance. That's what David wrote to his God, and that's what they sang when they came together in the temple. The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? And so what he had done is go out where everybody was afraid and where fear was dominating the Israelite army. And he had something different, not fear, but what? Faith. Faith that everything was going to be fine. And he went into battle with that faith. He went into that battle with a sling and a rock. And he came out a hero because he asked himself the question, why should I be afraid? What can mere mortals do to me? He wasn't afraid. 1 Peter 5, 8 and 9 says, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the what? In the faith. Don't be afraid. Resist the devil, James 4, verse 7 says, and he will flee from you. And I've seen videos from Africa where men who are brave enough to go out and steal a carcass away from a lion who has just killed an antelope or something in the fields and take it, and then of course they don't stay around, they run with it. But they jump up out of the grass, scare the lions run, they run over and get a part of that carcass, leaving some of it for the lion, and then dash away. And so you can actually scare a lion and take his prey from him if you're fast enough and willing to do it. And so he says, when the devil gets close to you, jump up, scare the devil to death, and then grab your life again and run away from it. Don't let him catch you. And that's what we need to do. When Moses passed away and Joshua had to take his place, God made a promise to Joshua. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave nor forsake you. That's the promise that God, the Heavenly Father, has given us. And so when we see things that scare us, and we get worried about what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen to my 401k, what's going to happen to my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren when I'm gone, will this country still exist? Will this place still exist? Will you still be able to have faith here? Will the government allow you to worship? All of these things that come into our heads, have faith, and the fear will disappear. 1 John 4:4 says, you, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. Who's that talking about? Who is this that's in the world? It's talking about the Antichrist, the ones that John said were coming, people that would come and be against Christ and teach against Christ and try and persuade people to not believe in Christ. And he says, don't be afraid of the Antichrist. And there were a lot of them in the first century. Some people think that there's still a person who's the Antichrist is going to come to now. The Bible tells us very clearly those Antichrists, multiple people, did approach a church in the first century, did try to destroy their faith. And John says, don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of them. Resist them. Go against them. Prove them wrong. Because the one who is in us is greater than the one that's in them. And who is in them? Satan is in the Antichrist. And when they come and try and destroy your faith or the church, don't let them get away with it. Colossians 3, as we get down to our last two verses here. 1 through 3. Since then you have been raised with Christ. And that's talking about being baptized for the remission of your sins and being buried and then raised with Christ to walk in newness of life, like Romans 6 says. Set your hearts, listen to this, guys, set your hearts on things above. Put your heart in the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. You know, you get up in the morning, Sunday, and you turn on TV and everything is just bad news, bad news, bad news, bad news. Wait, I have a suggestion for you. You know what that suggestion is? Guess. Turn it off. Turn it off. Sing a hymn while you eat your breakfast on Sunday morning. It'll be a whole lot better. Because you need to set your heart and your mind on things that are above, not on things that are here on this earth. You don't need to sit there and just gawk at Goliath and let your fear grow and grow. No. Set your mind on things above. Keep your eyes on God. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. And have put on the new self. You're a new person now as a Christian, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. I went out on the porch yesterday. I looked up at the skies again. And I've said this several times during the course of this year, 2021, 2020. Also, I was saying the same thing. That the more I study the universe, and I realize how huge the universe is, and how we're on a little speck of sand floating around out in the middle of it all. And it's such a wonderful place. You look at the pictures of the moon. Who wants to live there? You look at the pictures that we have on Mars, etc. And I don't know that all of the universe is like that, but I suspect it is. Hot, cold, impossible to live there, no atmosphere. But we live here, and this is like a Garden of Eden. I mean, it really is. God has given us this place to live and provided what we need. We're so blessed. But you know, it says that we are now being dressed in the image of God, the Creator. We're becoming like Him. We're trying to be like Him. We're trying to look like Him, talk like Him, act like Him. Imitate Him in every possible way. Ephesians 5:1 says that we are imitators of God, and He is the Creator. So here we are in the midst of His creation. And now we need to be like him. We don't need to be a bunch of scarecrows. Inanimate, incapable of doing good or bad, incapable of speaking, walking, talking, thinking, reasoning. You know, we're not of that nature. We're God's nature. And we need to reflect that in what we do and who we are. That's our story. Fear not. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition. Go to God and pray. You got worries, you got fears, go to God and pray. And do it with thanksgiving. Thank God for everything he's done for you. Why? Because then you remember that he is a God who does take care of you and has already done a good job of that in the past and is still willing to do it. We're coming up on Thanksgiving, and Jim's going to be preaching to us about thanks living. I can't wait to hear that sermon. And present your requests to God. Tell him. He doesn't mind taking requests. And so give him your requests. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Your hearts and your minds again. You put thoughts of God, thoughts of the wonderful things he's taught us and shown us in your heart. You put the thanksgiving in your mind, and all of a sudden the fears go away. The joy comes, and the world can't understand you anymore. Your neighbors can't understand you anymore. You're not quaking, you're not shaking, you're not afraid, because you have a God who is all powerful. Finally, brothers and sisters, the very next verse after that one. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. You know, the things that show up on the news every morning. No. Or repeat, so that we don't get confused with one of the channels on TV. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Set your mind hard on things like that. Then you'll be like little King David when he was not king, but just a shepherd boy. You won't be afraid of anything or anybody. Restore my soul. We sang it, and that's a good song to finish with. We're not going to sing it. You won't be able to lead it no way. And so we'll close right there. I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. Bill Norman comes up now and makes the announcements. And I've always